Welcome back to the Time to Grow Up Dad podcast with your host Chong, and today I have got Mickey on the show. Actually, I should have asked you this before we start recording. This is going to be, it's pretty late for you now there, right? It's like,
It's 9 p.m. here. Well, it's like just bedtime. Kids just went to bed.
yeah. So how many kids do you have?
I have 3 girls.
How old do you mind me asking?
Yeah, they are 5, 3, and 9 months old.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We're in the thick of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought, yeah, you're in the thick of it.
Yep.
Oh wow. How are you dealing? Is the 9-month-old sleeping through?
So the 9-month-old, I have to be honest, we were spoiled. Our first two, the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old, were great sleepers. Like 8 to 12 weeks in, they were just like out cold, 7 to 10 hour nights. They were sleeping really good. This third one, she's given us a run for our money. She sleeps. She takes a good nap during the day, couple hour nap during the day, but then at night she'll give us a 3 or 4 hour stretch, and then after that it's like very broken up, a couple hours here, a couple hours there. So we're still a little bit in the sleep deprived stage, a little longer than usual, but it's all right. We're still rolling with it.
Yeah. I suppose like when you've got a 5-year-old, at least the 5-year-old can kind of help out to a degree.
Yeah.
Right?
She's awesome. Yeah, our oldest she's like the little ringleader. So if I'm like, hey, can you just watch Marley for a second? She'll take her, and I can go, wash my hands or do whatever I gotta do. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice, mate. Well, that was a little bit of a tangent, but aside from that, what do you do for work? Why did I bring you on here? Actually, I don't know, but what do you do for work?
I'm actually a teacher, full-time teacher, and then on the side I have a coaching and remote coach and programming business that I run called DBC. So I like my daytime job is teaching, and then my nighttime gig is when I have free time is I run DBC. So I wear 2 hats kind of.
Yeah. What do you teach?
I teach 8th grade social studies. So like civic and government is what I teach at my school.
Ooh, that's fascinating. Do you find that obviously your kids are not in 8th grade, but do you find that it's hard to take off the teacher's hat and be a parent hat at home? They are pretty big in age group.
Yeah, it is sometimes, because it is interesting because in class, like when I'm teaching, I have, every teacher, no matter what they say, they're control freaks, because when you're in your classroom, you kind of like, it's your little world. So everything runs based on how you want it to run. So when I come home, I have to I've got to be careful not to be like that control freak and let things be a little bit more free flowing. I don't want to put on my classroom management hat at home, but I've learned some things too through teaching, like, patience and just stuff about kids' development in general that I think will help me as a parent, but definitely sometimes hard to like teacher hat, parent hat, finding that line is sometimes tricky.
Yeah. I know I've got a couple friends who are teachers as well, and they're like new fathers, new mums, and it's always a bit of a tricky situation because they teach and then they come home, and I think it's trickier if you're teaching your daughter in the same class. That would probably be very, very tricky.
Yeah. Now,
if it does happen.
It's unfortunately I'm in a different town, so I don't have to do that. But I have some of my colleagues have done that, and they did say it is a tricky thing to navigate. But they're good teachers, so they were able to do it. But it's not easy for sure.
Yeah, especially the discipline part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, prior to kids, then you were pretty heavily invested into being a competitive CrossFit athlete, and prior to that, you were still teaching whilst you were competing.
Yes, I was. So like, long story short, my story arc is like I was a college, post high school soccer player. So I played in college for 4 years, and then after that, I still had this competitive itch that I needed to scratch. So I found CrossFit after I graduated. So I had a teaching career, and then I was doing competitive CrossFit for about 6 or 7 years. And that was like my whole life, right? I was traveling around the country to do competitions and training and all that. So it pretty much was my life and identity for 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years. Yeah. And then obviously the kid came along. Was it hard to sort of transition out of that life? Because people always say like, when you're a couple, life is very different. And then when you have kids, like it's almost like it's not even a small switch. It's like a complete different chapter, even like a different book, even.
Yes, that's a great analogy. It is like a different book. Like that book was over. Once your kid comes, your child's born, the new book starts. The old book goes on the shelf because everything else has changed. So yeah, like when I met my wife, we started dating, and when we decided we wanted to get married and have kids, we both agreed because she was also a competitive CrossFit athlete. Actually, we both kind of decided like, all right, it's time to retire, right? Unofficially retire from like the competitive stuff. We're still going to do fitness and try to be healthy and fit, but we're not going to do as much CrossFit and train that hard and put all that time in because we just won't be able to do that when we have a house and kids and things like that. So we had started transitioning a little bit, but it was definitely a big jarring change to my just schedule, the sleep schedule, and how much time I actually had to get in a workout when my first daughter was born, when Hadley was born. But in some ways it was good for me because I was probably spending too much time training and I was like a little bit obsessive. So it made me be more efficient with my time and training.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be fair, like out of, like people bash CrossFit a lot, but I think out of all the possible training modalities that exist in terms of physical activity out there, CrossFit's probably the one that, I think it's popular for a reason. Obviously, I think with the community aspect of things, but I think from an actual, what do you get out of a workout? Like best bang for your buck, best bang for your buck. We're not trying to get jacked. We're not trying to run a marathon. We're just trying to like tick all the boxes. We're just trying to tick all the boxes. I think CrossFit is one of those like, if you can do it, you've only that much limited time. Like I said, transitioning into that parent life, I think it's probably one of the forms of exercise or I guess activities or hobbies that will probably have the largest investment of returns for the time put into it, I think,
Yeah, I think
from
that's
a
a pretty
fitness
good. That's a
standpoint.
pretty good. I think that's a pretty fair assessment because a lot of times people have an hour, right? So, or even less, or maybe in 30 minutes. If you go to a CrossFit class, they're usually about an hour long, and you can get a lot of fitness in if they're run well and it's efficient. I think it depends on the gym you go to and the program you follow, but I definitely agree that bang for your buck, if you want to get like what I call GPP, like general physical preparedness, CrossFit does a good job because it mixes all these different modalities together. So I definitely, for a parent, especially a new parent who's tight on time, it could be a good option for them for sure.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I mean, I came from a powerlifting background and transitioning sort of from that into that parenthood, like, all right, like, powerlifting's cool, don't get me wrong. I still competed even then, but like sometimes your mindset kind of like switches, like, all right, like maybe lifting heavy weights might not cut it if they want to run. You're like, it's like, I might need to actually start running.
You gotta have that. You gotta have an engine to go along with those muscles to keep up with the kiddos.
Yeah, I think like to your point as well, like, and then kids, like when you actually get a kid, it kind of changes your perspective on a lot of things. To your point, like the transition was obviously like it makes you realize things where you don't realize until like the kids come along. And to your point there, Mickey, it's like, oh, uh, now I'm probably a little bit too obsessed. Probably have to kind of do something else.
Now with powerlifting, I'm curious. You were, your goal is moving mass, like as much load as possible. Once you had your first child, did you have some concerns like I don't want to injure my back or have an injury pushing like loads too heavy and then push too much? Then I can't pick up my kid off the floor. Or I can't bend down to change a diaper or something like that. Was that ever like become something that crossed your mind or you considered?
Ooh, very interesting. So in my experience, what sort of happened was leading up to this would have been 2022. So I was selected to be part of the New Zealand team for the powerlifting Commonwealth sort of games, I guess if you want to call it. And so, interestingly, leading up to that point, I was actually talking to my coach at the time. I'm like, hey man, like I'm pretty strong. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, that's kind of why I'm part of the team, I guess. But I'm also starting to kind of like feel the burnout a little bit. Like I think every competitive athlete gets to a point where like, all right, like I need to I've been doing this thing, like it's been my heart and soul. I now need to take a step back. So I said, all right, I'm feeling burned out a little bit. And then ironically, I stumbled upon jujitsu, and then I started as like, it wasn't with any intention, as a bit of a hobby. And this was all before we even found out that we were going to be parents. So I started doing jujitsu and I was like, oh shit, like, so this is what fitness feels like, I guess. It sucked. It sucked. But then once we found out we were parents, and this was like a couple months before Commonwealths, it's less so a case of like, oh, like I'm afraid I'll injure my back and I can't change the diapers, or I can't pick them up. It was kind of more like, hey, like if I could only lift heavy stuff. And I guess the context here is, I'm not too sure with CrossFit, but in jiu-jitsu, a lot of kids are involved in it. Like it's a very heavy, it's a sport that's, let's be honest here, funded by the parents, and a lot of the kids go there. And I'm sure it's kind of the same maybe in your town as well. And so, yeah, and so like I start seeing all the kids play, like they start doing their thing, and I'm like, oh, well, like if my kid wants to start doing this when they're grown up, I don't want to be that dad who's immobile. I can't even go a 5 minute round without huffing and puffing. Like I need to figure out my fitness for them so that I can keep up with them. So less from an injury standpoint, more so a case of like, I really need to get myself to a position where, so I've got a boy and a second one coming in March. Look, actually, yeah, very soon. It's like a couple of weeks. And my motto, at least since I found out, my wife was pregnant, was like, we want to try to, at least I will personally try to like keep up with them as long as I can in whatever they want to do in their sort of physical pursuits, right? I think that's how I sort of looked at it. I was like, all right, I'm kind of strong, but now I really need to figure out the other aspects of health.
You want to be more well-rounded dad, not just squatting
yeah,
300
not just
kilos. You also want to
300
run
kilos.
that 5K in
Yeah, I need to
25
be
or
able to
less.
run. I need, ideally I'll be able to touch my toes as well. That'll be good.
Yeah, mobility. Yeah, all that stuff. I think that's like, it's, we're laughing, but it's like, it is true that like as a parent, you should have like a well-rounded approach to fitness, right? You can't lean too much into just strength, or even, I have friends who are like, I'm just a runner, and they all they want to do is run. Well, you got to have some strength to go along with the endurance stuff too, I think, just to be well-rounded athlete and a parent, right? Because you can't do the stuff that requires the muscle, the strength, but you can run all day. You got to have a little bit of balance, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like, I've seen obviously a lot of the stuff that you do with your training as well. There's obviously a lot of strength components to it, but then there's obviously things like sleds, like pulls and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's important, I think, for parents mostly to understand, like, at some point your kid will question you on like what you're doing, but if you can kind of fire back and say, well, I'm kind of good, I'm not good at everything, but I'm decent at everything, it's a pretty good argument.
Yeah, like you said, like incorporating sleds and carries and things like loaded carries, and then some forms of any kind of conditioning. You don't have to go run a 5K. You could get on an Airdyne bike or a fan bike or a row or something. I think just mixing that stuff all in and not getting too stuck in one box with your fitness regimen, whatever it is as a parent, is the best way to go. And obviously, you're gonna have the things you love the most. Like I really love the strength and conditioning stuff, the sports science things, jumping, sprinting. But I think you also have to incorporate the other stuff just to be well-rounded for your health too. Like you want your resting heart rate to be low, so you have low blood pressure and you're healthy, because you want to be around for a long time. Like you said, I want to be able to keep up with my kids as long as possible, as long down the line as you can. So you've got to check all those boxes.
Yeah. So I guess to your point there, like obviously you run your own coaching as well, and like, to be fair, I would probably rate you as someone who's on, based on the general public scale, at least, like definitely on the fitter side of things, right? We probably don't have to beat around the bush for sure. So why do you think it's important, at least? So over, you've got 3 kids, right? You've got a 9-month-old as well, right? So it's not like you're a stranger to having kids. It's 3. And I'm sure you've seen this, and you potentially have conversations outside of the podcast here as well. But why do you think parents should kind of focus on their health and fitness a little bit more.
Yeah. I always tell people be selfish, which sounds wrong, but as a parent to be selfish. But I think oftentimes parents get so hyper focused on taking care of the kids and not taking care of themselves. They forget about taking care of themselves. So setting aside some time to take care of yourself in the fitness realm of things, like it's one thing to eat healthy and get good sleep, but if you leave out that fitness component, that's a really big part of it. And it's going to help you both physically and mentally, right? You're going to get the free the free dopamine and the serotonin, right, from the workout, the response in your brain, those good mental hits, right? So I think the mental positive aspects of it, it's like psychological impact of it, and the physical are just you can't really, there's no pill that's going to fix that, right? You can't take a pill that's magically going to do those two things for you, and you have to just set aside time for yourself. I remember when I had our first daughter, and it was like this slap in the face of, oh my gosh, I can't train for 3 hours and do whatever I want. I was like, okay, what can I do in 30 minutes? Because she's got a nap right now. I got to mow the lawn, and I want to do something else. Like, all right, I'm going to wear my weight vest while I mow the lawn. And then when I'm done, I'll do a few like dumbbell exercises really quick. And then she'll probably be waking up. So just finding the time, even if it's a little bit, to take care of yourself, I think is massively important. Because again, like we've talked about and you said, it's about being around and being capable for as long as possible, right? Because you're going to take care of them for a long time, and you don't want them to have to take care of you for very long, right? At the end, you want that time to be as small as possible. So you're investing in yourself, but you're also investing in your family so that you're able and capable to do all the things that your kids want you to do. Hey, Dad, throw me in the pool. Oh, I can't really get up off of the chair because I got bad knees or a bad back or whatever else. All those little things I think are just massively important as a parent.
Yeah, that's actually a lot of good points, and I think something that doesn't really get, well, I guess it's talked about a little bit more, but the truth of the reality is that social media predominantly is governed mostly, I guess, by, well, I would say the younger generation, but I think at least, I don't know how the algorithm works, to be honest, but at least what I see, it's like a lot less new parents that focus on fitness and a lot more of people giving fitness advice because they don't have kids, or maybe their kids are already 15 and 16. Essentially, they're a grown-ass man, grown-ass woman. You can kind of do all you want. And to your point there, I think a lot of, I have personally found that a lot of parents, and I want to pick your brain on this. Obviously, you and I have both been in competitive sport to some degree. I feel like a lot of parents who come from a competitive sport background and get hit with the reality of parenthood almost lose their way when it comes to being fit, because their perception of being fit was very much competitive sport. 2 to 3 hours of training, 4 to 5 days a week, maybe double sessions a day even. But you kind of said something there which I pretty much did to a degree. Like, I only have 20 minutes. What can I do? I'm not going to make a lot of gains. Let's be honest here. But moving your body is better than not doing anything, even though you might not necessarily get as much progress as you would like. And then obviously down the track, once they grow up, then you can kind of obviously go back and do your sport that you love. But I think at least for the first, you've got 3 kids, so I guess at least for the first year or two, like it's just kind of doing the bare minimum and not really expecting too much of return, but just maintaining stuff. So from a mindset perspective, what would your take beyond that? What would your take be? Because coming from competitive, like that's all we know, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think a great question that people have to consider. Because if you were a competitive athlete, like you said, you're like your whole purpose, right? Your purpose was, I'm training for this event. I want to succeed at the CrossFit Games, or I want to be a good college soccer player. But once you have kids, I think a mind shift has to happen where your purpose is now like, I want to be the best parent I can be. And part of that should be your health and wellness. Yeah, you need to be there for your kids and, make sure dinner's made and the laundry's made. But sometimes folding the laundry can wait, and you can do a 30-minute workout because you also need that. Your kids will be okay without folded shirts for 30 minutes if you go and just hit some push-ups and air squats and jump on the bike or the rower for 30 minutes in a circuit or something along those lines. So I think the key is you change your purpose. Like I was at one point a competitive CrossFitter. My purpose was be the best CrossFitter I can be. Had a kid. No longer is it CrossFit that I really care about. It's I want to be the best dad I can be. So it's like I'm going to be the fittest, fastest, most fit dad on the block. That's my point. That's my goal. And that became my little carrot. Now, obviously, like we're not having a dad Olympics on my street, but I just thought of it as my purpose. Not yet. But my purpose was like I'm just going to be the fittest dad I can be, so that my kid can see what that fitness is important. And so I'm around for a long time. I want to be here for as long as possible for my kids. And that became my purpose instead of my competitive sport.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things. Like there is still, it's funny. We say that like competitive sport, and then obviously having a kid mindset shift, but it's almost like that in a very cheesy, corny way, which is good. It's being competitive with other dads to try to like be as fit as other dads, because like at the end of the day, like you could pretty much just take that as a competitive sport in itself. Like we joked about the dad Olympics. The reality of the matter is like there are dads who are very unfit, and they're probably dads like yourself who are kind of pushing the boundaries on the other end, right? And so I think maybe another way to think about it as a competitive athlete, like try to a good way to maybe think about it is like, all right, like I can't compete in my sport at the moment, but can I compete with other dads to be as fit as them, right? And then it's always a bit of a bragging right thing, right? Like like it's a bit of a good ego boost, It's like a good ego boost.
Yeah, I often think of that type of thing. And again, I live on a cul-de-sac, this dead end road, and there's a bunch of families with kids all around the same age as ours. So there's a lot of parents, and I do all my yard work. I always wear a 40-pound vest, like when I mow the lawn or when I shovel. And I always kind of go out there with a grin, knowing that I'm the only dad on the block that's doing that. And they're all looking, and we're all friends. So they all like look at me and they're laughing and waving with their snow blower, right? Their machine is blowing the snow and I'm just shoveling it. Like I'm the snow blower, I'm the machine. So it's like, it isn't competitive, but it kind of is, because I'm like, oh, I got one on you because I'm doing this and you're not doing that. And again, it's good for me. It's good. It's a fitness. It's free fitness is what I always refer to it as. But that little competitive thing it never really goes away. You just change.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you apply it.
Where you channel the competitiveness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, to your point then, because obviously people in your street might not necessarily know what you've done in your past life, but I'm sure they see you work out and train. And what's your advice of being consistent, especially for a 9-month-old? So obviously in the last 9 months, you obviously posted quite a lot of stuff on social media anyway, so you're obviously still training leading up to this point. You've got already 3 kids. I'd say like 5 years of consistent training as a dad doesn't sound like a lot, but for parents out there, like 5 years of consistent training with kids of that age is very impressive. Like, so what's your take? What's your advice? Tips?
When you just put that in perspective, I was like, oh my gosh, it's been 5 years. And it started making me laugh in my head a little bit. So I honestly think there's a few things. Number one, my wife is super supportive. So being a team with your spouse, assuming you're not a single parent, which if you're a single parent, these things can still apply to you, but leaning on your spouse or significant other and, hey, I need 30 minutes. Can I go work out really quick? Right. Because sometimes you just can't get up early enough to do it before everyone's awake. And there's just not a slice of time when the kids aren't around or aren't occupied. So you just need them to help out. So having a supportive wife has been massively helpful. If I need to sneak a workout in when the kids are around, she's always open and willing to, give me that 30 minutes I need. Biting off small chunks. Sometimes I think people look at their fitness journey and they're like, I got to work out 7 days a week, an hour every day. And really, maybe you only start out with 1 or 2 days a week and then build on that. I think is something that a lot of people miss out, and then they get overwhelmed because they're like, I'm going to work out 5 or 6 days a week. And then they miss 2 or 3 days the first week and fall off the wagon completely and get discouraged. I think take small bites in the beginning and then build on that success and get to where you need to be. And honestly, you don't need more than 3 to 4 workouts a week if you just want to maintain a healthy lifestyle. you're not a professional athlete. So 3 or 4 good sessions a week is probably as much as most people need and will help a lot of people make progress, especially if you're coming from like going from couch potato to just getting back into fitness. 3 or 4 days a week is probably more than enough. So small chunks, supportive spouse, and stick to the basics. Like I've always tried to keep it really simple and not go crazy and complicated, because number one, I don't have time to set up all kinds of crazy equipment usually. So I need to keep it simple: dumbbells, kettlebells, a lot of times, body weight stuff. And, like I said, stick to the basics: hip, hinge, squat, lunge, push, pull. It doesn't need to be crazy to be effective.
Yeah, I mean, you have a home gym, so for those people who try to or want to be consistent, like you don't need a lot, albeit your home gym's pretty kitted out.
Yeah, I've taken some
albeit
time to build it up.
albeit I say that he has a home gym, but that home gym is probably it's got more stuff than most actual gyms. So on that point, maybe throw out a couple of things. Like, so let's say someone's listening to this, they understand, all right, I want to get healthy. I understand. Like, what are some basic gym equipment situations that you would get? Because we talked about like trying to keep it short, sharp. We've got nappies to change, we've got clothes to fold, and let's say in a very small confined space, obviously COVID probably made things a little bit more, like it really kind of stretched out all of our imaginations a little bit more. But what are your thoughts?
If I was gonna say, some things, if you're gonna just build a little mini home gym, you had a small apartment or a small space, and it's like your emergency kit as a parent, that you're gonna jump into that spot to do your workout real quick while your kid is napping or whatever else. I'd say 1 or 2 dumbbells is all you need, of like moderate weight, nothing crazy heavy. 1 or 2 kettlebells of moderate weights, nothing super heavy, so that you can use it for a multitude of things. And again, that's like athlete dependent, person dependent, but like 2 dumbbells, 2 kettlebells. And then if you can find one of those like door jam pull-up bars, something like that you can stick into a door jam. Even if you're not capable of doing pull-ups, you can use it to hang like some TRX straps or some rings from, to do a multitude of different things in a small space. And even like just those things, like a couple kettlebells, a couple dumbbells, a pull-up rig with some rings, you could do a ton of stuff. And then cardio wise, I hate recommending cardio equipment because it takes up so much space and oftentimes becomes a clothes hanger for a lot of people. But if I was going to say there was one piece of cardio equipment you were going to invest in if you had to stick it in your house, I would say make it a bike, like a C2 bike or a fan bike, like a assault bike or one of those echo bikes from Rogue. They don't take a lot of space, and they're multifaceted in terms of you can do long, slow rides or short, sprinty things and get a lot out of it. But again, I don't like to say buy this piece of equipment, because they're expensive and they have a decent sized footprint. But if there was one you had to get, I'd say like get a fan bike probably. But really, that's all the things I think you need, because you can do so many body weight exercises with a couple kettlebells and a couple dumbbells, and maybe throw in some bands, like a skinny, easy, like light band, a medium band, and maybe a little bit of a heavier band. And right there, you've got a pretty potent recipe to do a lot of different exercises, and you don't need a lot of space.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't need a lot. You just need to keep moving, especially in the end of the day, like you're not trying to, at least from what we've kind of talked about so far, you're not trying to be like a professional athlete. You're just trying to like get the work done, get fit, get in, get out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like as you get older too, like, I mean, I'm 38 going on 39. Like you're not PRing much stuff, right? You're not getting a lot of PBs, personal bests on things. It's more so, can I maintain what I have? Because if I'm 38 now and my numbers are here, and I'm 48 in 10 years, but my numbers are the same, I'll take that, right? So like if you can just maintain what you have for as long as possible, if you're a fit person, that's all you need. You don't need to, you're not going to PR forever. That's going to fade away into the sunset eventually. So yeah, just maintaining what you got, grease the groove, and that's all you need.
Yeah. And have you gotten your 5-year-old involved in some of your CrossFit accolades?
So my kids I don't ever ask them to work out. What I'll say to them is, hey, I'm gonna go work out in the garage. Do you want to come? And what they'll do is like, it's like parallel play. Like I'll be working out and they're playing a game or whatever, and they might see something that they like that I'm doing, like, hey, can I jump on that box too? And they'll come jump on the box, or they'll like, I want to do some push-ups, or I want to do some burpees, or I want to do a kettlebell swing. So sort of like monkey see monkey do. I'm never like, hey, get over here, we're doing this circuit. They'll just kind of jump in where they want to. And I think them just seeing me and my wife working out and knowing that it's important that you do fitness for your health I think is what we want them to see. Because whenever they ask, we don't say, oh, I'm doing this to get a six pack. I just say, I'm doing this to be healthy. As I always say, I'm working out to be healthy. And that's the message we try to instill in them.
Yeah, because I think like that's also one of the things, and I think interestingly, it's, we were talking about parents trying to be healthy and be fit, and I don't know if this is probably a thing, I think, around the world. I think parents tend to send their kids away for like sport and stuff like that, but then parents would kind of just sit on the sidelines, beer in one hand, chips on the other, and just kind of like watching. You can tell that they're not very fit. You can see it. And then it's one of those things where I think it's like, it's very interesting because I think from parents, like you said, it's monkey see, monkey do. If you do something, your kids will follow. But I find it very intriguing that it doesn't work the other way around for a lot of people. Or it works, but it takes a long time. Like it takes parents so long, particularly the ones who are a little bit out of shape, a little bit unfit, but you're sending your kids to sport, whatever it might be. It takes parents so long to realize that they actually need to get fit for their own reasons. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. And I oftentimes find that those people were once really fit people. Something like if they're getting their kids involved in sport, they likely were involved in those sports too. So at one point they were super involved in their own fitness, but then they just gave it all up for some reason. A lot of times I hear the same things from people, like clients who come to me and they'll say, I'm too old to be doing sprints. Or I'm like, what do you mean you're too old? You're only XYZ number. And it's like, this is stuff you should do forever. Like, I think people have kids in a career and they think they sort of like, all right, I'm retiring from doing fitness. Like that phase of my life is over, when really that should be going forever. So I think it's like a mentality thing. It's like, oh, they checked out. Like once I hit 25 years old, I'm too old to be doing any of that stuff. It's like after 25 is when you need to be doing it, because up until then it was easy. Now it gets harder, and that's why you got to keep it going.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think like at least more and more parents these days are starting to value a little bit more about health and fitness. But I think to your point as well, like a lot of them have this sort of mentality of like, it's a phase. It's a phase. And it's like, honestly, like it is a phase, but like in the end of the day, like you still have to kind of be healthy. You need to show up. And if you don't, like to your earlier point, right? Like, are you really going to burden your child at the end of your life? And how long do you want them to take care of you? The less of that, the better, right? The longer of that, then it starts to kind of spiral down. Your mental health starts going to places because you have been taking care of them for so long, and now they're doing the same, and you kind of like, why am I doing this to them? And it doesn't bode well. I think it doesn't bode well with probably a lot of people. Yeah. So being a father of three now, and this is a question that I usually ask a lot of people that come on the show, and really it can only be one, because how I would phrase this next question. What is your biggest takeaway as a parent so far?
My biggest takeaway as a parent so far, and I'll boil it down to one. Oh my gosh, so biggest takeaway as a parent, I guess I'd have to say is, I guess don't sweat the small stuff. And that sounds like, that's such a cliche saying. But what I mean by that is there's just such, like having kids is just such chaos. Like every day is just a circus, that I've found, at least for me, for like my mental well-being, is I can't get caught up in sweating the small stuff. What I mean by that is like, oh, my kid didn't put their shoes in the right spot. Like, am I going to make a big deal about this? Am I going to really make this the thing that I'm going to like, start a little mini war with my 5-year-old over? Or did she at least take her shoes off before she ran through the house? Right. So all like, I just kind of like, to me, it's the big picture stuff. Like, okay, it's fine. I'm not going to sweat this small thing. Right. It's not a big deal. And obviously, like if my kid comes in the house and starts destroying the place and being an absolute terror, that's a big thing. And I got to take care of that. But if it's a small thing, I can't let that, because there's so many little small things that happen in a day when you have a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and 9-month-old. You'd lose your mind if you picked every single thing and let it bother you. And I'm not trying to say that being a parent is just a huge annoyance. I just mean, don't sweat the small stuff and enjoy the fun stuff that's going on. Because if you're always worried about the shoes being in the wrong place, you're missing out on your kid having fun in the living room, playing a game with her sisters and that kind of stuff. So I think not sweating the small stuff allows you to see the good stuff and enjoy the good stuff and just sort of bask in that rather than being so caught up in all the little things.
Yeah, I think that's always a important reminder. I think most parents tend to look at what, and I remind myself this as well. Like most parents tend to kind of look at it as like, what am I not doing good enough? What are they not doing good enough? They, the kids or whatever it might be. But then there's actually a lot of other good stuff that comes out of it. I think, like, to your point, like, don't worry too much about the small stuff. Like, it's going to happen inevitably. You're better off just like focusing on things that matter a little bit more and create the nice memories. If you have to clean up an extra dish at the end of the day, like, it's an extra dish. It's fine. Yeah, it's an extra shirt to wash. It's okay. Like, like, it's fine. Like, what's one extra nappy gonna be? Like,
yeah. And like, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I have days where I totally sweat the small stuff the whole time, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And those are the worst days because you get bogged down in it. But tonight, it was actually a perfect example. My middle child, Paisley, she's 3. She wanted to make her own burrito fajita thing, and she had a tortilla, and she was slapping on sour cream, like, way too much sour, just totally wasting it. And in my brain, I'm like, she's wasting all this sour cream. She's never going to eat it all. But she wanted to make her own thing. And she was so proud of herself for making her own fajita and putting sour cream on her own. So I just had to bite my tongue and just not say anything. But in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much wasted sour cream. So like, it was just one of those things. Like, it's just like, that stuff happens constantly when you have kids. So you just have to kind of just, swallow your pride and let it go.
Yeah, and then they learn. They pick up things. If you keep sweating on the small stuff, I think, I might be wrong, but I'm guessing like they start getting angsty about it, and they're
yeah.
They're like, oh, I can't do this because it probably is wrong. It's like, you know what? Like, whatever.
It just sets a bad tone. The tone, right? Also, like, the atmosphere starts to become negative, and it's no good.
That's why I'm like, mate, like, if you're gonna like fall, like, whatever, dude, like, you go fall, you go scrape your knee. If it really looks bad, we'll assess the situation on how high you can fall from.
yeah. There's degrees of falling.
There's degrees of falling. It's like falling off the table, no. Falling off the couch, whatever. You'll live.
Yeah. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. All right. So, where can people find you? Where can people get a little bit more help, particularly when it comes to trying to get back on the proverbial fitness wagon as a parent, or maybe even just someone wanting to start because they haven't really done so for themselves and they've kind of let it slide? Fire away social media.
Okay, so you can find me at the Dad Bod Chronicles on Instagram, and then I have a podcast too, Midlife Muscle and Strength podcast, which we'll have to have you on, which would be fun to have you on and do a little, back and forth. I have a co-host with me, JP. He's a good guy. So you can find me at the Dad Bod Chronicles on Instagram. Our podcast is the Midlife Muscle and Strength podcast. We talked a similar thing. We're both dads and talk about similar stuff. But, honestly, if you ever were curious about programming, stuff like that, you could always feel free to message me on Instagram and ask questions. I'm always all ears. And I love just, talking shop about fitness things with anybody and everybody. But, if I was going to give one piece of advice to a parent who is trying to get back in the wagon and get back into fitness, or just start, maybe they never did fitness and just, start their fitness journey, I'd say, you might want to find a coach like myself or you and ask them to build a program for you. And if you don't have the means to do that, or you don't know a good coach, just start really small, start really simple, start going for walks and doing body weight exercises, push-ups or air squats or whatever your body will allow at the moment, and build off of that. So I think the key is start small and then build off of those little wins. And then if you get to the point where you want to coach, finding someone like me or you who can build a program that is efficient with time and hits all the things you need and want is the best way to go.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to end the show, mate. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you all for watching on YouTube, and we will catch you in the next one. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.